Hey everyone. So today's plant is a bit of a different one and not one that most people would recognize. This, and I will drop the Latin name down below because I really cannot remember what it is. It's not one of these plants that you keep seeing being mentioned all the time, so I will not remember what the Latin name is. I'll put it down here, but I do know what the common name is. This is the mastic plant. And this might be quite surprising to some of my Greek friends out there, Greek and Cypriot friends. This is something that is used, or part of this plant is used in, generally speaking, baking in terms of Greek and Cypriot culture. And I think a lot of the Arabic nations as well use this for a lot of their desserts. So this is a plant that I have indoors in the UK because it's too cold. Even some in the summer months you can probably take it out and it would probably appreciate it. As you can see, I don't know whether or not you're seeing some of the morphology of this plant. I'll bring it in closer so you can kind of see the stem and you can see some of the leaves as well. It's nothing particularly exciting necessarily. It does look a bit like a mini olive tree, and that's another thing. So you get this gnarled tree trunk type of structures within the plant, and then you get the branching out and then the much smaller leaves. It almost looks a bit like an overgrown bonsai as well, you can possibly say at this point. But these are very, very unique plants, and I think that was why I wanted to have this in my care, and I'd never seen it come up anywhere normally. And I think out of sheer chance I saw this in the local plant shops of all things, so just like, yep, having one of those. Because essentially the part of this plant that is edible is when they get a lot older. Obviously this plant is nowhere near that age yet, so the tree trunks are tapped slightly like maple syrup, but in the sense that the sap of the tree isn't as runny as maple syrup. It's much more dense, so it's kind of like a crystalline structure. It's like a clear crystal almost when it comes out of the plant, and that is usually very, very hard. That is something that you would then use a pestle and mortar and just turn it into dust. And you would use that mastic gum, essentially is what it's called, mastic gum. You would use it in desserts. And this is a thing that a lot of people hear when they try to make things like baklava or anything that's along those lines. They're just like, I can never get it to taste quite like what I did when I was on holiday in Greece or Cyprus or some of the Arabic nations. It never tastes quite the same. That's why you're missing that one ingredient, which is very much an aromatic ingredient, and a lot of people from those nations, it's a very fond memory of your childhood. The smell of that really harkens back to your childhood of having desserts all the time. It's also something that's used traditionally within those nations to create a kind of natural chewing gum, because essentially you can theoretically find softer versions of that resin, and if you pop one in your mouth and you eat it, it's quite strongly floral. I think that's the best description I can give it to begin with. And you chew it and it just chew a bit like chewing gum. So the more you know, right? So this is a plant that I have in terracotta. It grows in very few places around the world, so that's why another reason why I wanted to grab it. I know in Greece, it grows specifically. I don't think it grows anywhere other than one specific island, Chios, and it's a very expensive ingredient. That resin is a very expensive ingredient, and it's become even more expensive now because they had some massive bushfires a few years back, and I think a third or even half of all the trees that were these trees got burnt down. So the demand hasn't diminished. If anything, there's even more people looking for the mastic gum. But the production, the plants that take very many years, they're quite long-lived plants, a bit like olive plants. I don't think they live quite as long, but they are quite formidable. They look like that in nature. They're huge. And it takes a while to get them to the level where they can tap them for some of this resin. So it's a shame that those bushfires kind of wiped up such a large part of the cultivation of these plants. I know there's other places in the world, some of the Arabic nations do grow them as well. It needs a very specific environment. So far it's doing well in my house. It surprised even me. This was a bit of a risk. I'm going to buy it and see what happens. But these will usually grow in quite arid Greek island style situations, so quite warm summers, quite chunky soil. So I've used my arid mix and it seems to love it. I water it like once a week because that's roughly when it dries out. I still do give it some fertilizer. This sits in a south-facing window with all of my other succulents, and it loves it loves it there basically. So these plants are okay to be beat down. Normally this is a plant that if I live in the UK, if it was a slightly warmer, sunnier climate, I would probably have this outdoors year round, but I'm pretty sure these don't do well in frost. And considering that we've just started to have the first few frosts of the year and we even had snow a couple of days ago, not one that I would want to have outdoors. But an interesting one that I thought I'd showcase, because this is one that a lot of people that collect houseplants might have never even heard of before. So a very cool plant with a bit of history to it and a bit of a nod to my Greek background and culture. So yeah, if you've got any questions, I will try my best to answer it. As I said, there's not an awful lot that I know about this plant, but I can tell you how I've cared for it in my situation. And yeah, drop any comments or questions down below and let's have that conversation. In the meantime, I hope you have a great rest of your day and hopefully I shall see you here soon. Thanks. Bye.